The Georgia Bulldogs are going to play 8 conference games in 2024, and I'm going to tell you who I think's on the schedule.
Told them, how about the fucking Dogs? That's what I told them.
Let's start at the beginning. The SEC doesn't care what you think about the decision to play 8 conference games in 2024. They've won 13 of the last 17 national championships, including the last 4. They do not care whether or not you sit out there and whine about how many conference games they play. If you want to take it up with them, go play them, beat them. Otherwise, shh. Under this 8-game schedule, the divisions will be eliminated, but the conference is going to maintain the primary and secondary rivalries for every school. The top 2 teams across the 16-team standings are going to go to Atlanta to play in the SEC championship game. Every school will play 8 conference games plus 1 game against a Power 5 non-conference opponent. Now, that 1 game is just the minimum requirement. You can play more, and Georgia will. So who are the Dogs going to play in 2024? Well, this is completely subjective, and there's no telling how it's actually going to shake out. But I did have some things that helped me make my decision along the way. The choices I made are based off of the fact that I believe this is all driven by money, just like everything else in the world today, and especially in college football. It's driving the realignment that has brought Oklahoma and Texas into the SEC for 2024 in the first place. Georgia will open the season against Clemson in Atlanta. I think the Dogs are going to get Auburn, Florida, Vanderbilt, and Alabama inside Sanford Stadium. They're also going to have 2 out-of-conference opponents that are going to be home games, and they're going to finish the year between the hedges against Georgia Tech. So that leaves 4 games, and I have the Dogs going on the road to take on South Carolina, Kentucky, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. Why did it shake out this way for me? The conference made it a priority to maintain every team's primary and secondary rivals. That means that the Dogs are absolutely going to play Auburn and Florida in 2024. I'm putting those games at home. Again, Florida's in Jacksonville, but it's counted as a home game. I'm also going to give the Dogs Vanderbilt at home because in this new 16-team format, you just could have a murderer's row, and you have to give a team a lesser opponent somewhere across the schedule. Vanderbilt is that team for the Dogs. I'm also going to give Alabama to the Dogs between the hedges. That's the game that everybody beats on the SEC about. The best teams don't play. I think they're going to rectify that in 2024. This could have been a money game that would have satisfied both Disney as well as the SEC. It could have been LSU. I decided to make it Alabama just simply because LSU made it to the championship game last year. We just saw those 2 teams. We could very well see those 2 teams in the championship game in Atlanta in 24. So I'm sending the Crimson Tide to Athens to take on the Dogs. Notice Tennessee is not on the schedule in 2024. That's for a couple of reasons. When we were talking about the pods and they were going to 3 permanent rivals, Tennessee wasn't among that group. Also, Tennessee is not a traditional rival of the University of Georgia. It is not a game that has to be played every year. Besides, Tennessee has their own rivals that they would like to keep, like Vanderbilt, Alabama, Mississippi, and you can't play everybody. So with that in mind, I put South Carolina on here because that's one of those games that goes a little more one way than the other. Georgia doesn't really consider South Carolina a rival, but the Carolina people would be all up in arms if they didn't get to play Georgia. The Kentucky Wildcats made the cut for Georgia's 2024 schedule as a road game. This is a team that was floated as one of Georgia's permanent rivals in the pod system when the 9-game schedule was still under consideration. And I thought that, paired with what I said about Tennessee earlier, was reason enough to give them the nod over the VOLS on the schedule for 2024. That leaves a couple of games for the 2024 schedule. I went with Texas A&M on the road for Georgia. Texas A&M and Georgia have only played 1 time since the Aggies came into the league, and Georgia has never made a trip out to College Station. I believe the conference wants to rectify that, and they're just going to get it out of the way here with this schedule in 2024. Georgia goes to College Station to take on Texas A&M. And for that last slot on the schedule, I'm going to go with one of the new kids on the block and say that Georgia goes to Norman, Oklahoma to take on the Oklahoma Sooners. This game was originally scheduled for 2023 in the 2nd week of the season, and it was a road game for the Dogs. But the conference said they couldn't play that game with Texas and Oklahoma coming into the league. So I say they make that right. Georgia gets the call to go out to Norman and take on the Sooners in 2024. So there you have it. My thoughts on who the Dogs are going to play in 2024. Am I right? Who knows? But we're all going to find out soon enough. Go Dogs!
We will not be hunted at the University of Georgia. I can promise you that.